Good evening and welcome to the Tuesday, March 5th business meeting of the Olympia City Council. For the record, Council met earlier this evening for an executive session regarding matters of real estate. We're going to kick off tonight's meeting with a briefing from Kelly Grossman, our Strategic Communications Director, who's been on camera a lot today. And we're going to want to give you the big picture on the city's comprehensive approach to our homelessness crisis, and also encourage those of you viewing at home to, or when you get home today in the audience, to visit our city's website, which has a very deep and broad response to what the city is doing to address this crisis. And it's one of those other ways that we're trying to be as transparent as possible with our community about the actions that we are taking in this area. So with that, Kelly.
Thank you, Mayor Selby, council members. Good to see you again. It's a little cold here. I was in Arizona yesterday, so it was I'm a little chilly tonight. I wanted to start, before we go into the overview, just sort of give you an update of where we are today around the removal of the encampment at Smart Lot. Today, the staff removed the unsanctioned camp at the city-owned Smart Lot on the corner of State and Franklin. It was not a safe or sanitary place for anyone to be. Notice was given last Wednesday, February 27th. Beyond this, the city has been very open for weeks about our intentions to remove the site. In preparation for the camp removal, several options were offered to the Smart Lot campers for safe, secure places to go. 20-plus spaces were made available at the Mitigation Site, a block away from the Smart Lot. Additional beds were available at the Salvation Army, as well as the Union Gospel Mission. There were enough offered options for everyone at the Smart Lot, though some declined the offered spaces. We know about 20 people moved from the Smart Lot to the Mitigation Site, and that site is now full. The removal filled up the secure storage the city had available, but our partners, the Port of Olympia, has let us know that they have another storage unit available and waiting for us. I'd like to give a big thank you for the work and help of a bunch of people. There's a group, the Emergency Homeless Response Coordination Team. A good portion of that group works behind the scenes on finance and logistics and things like that support the work that's being done. So I'd like to give them a shout out because they make a lot of this happen. OPD Walking Patrol, the Familiar Faces crew, the Crisis Response Team, CP&D's team, the Downtown Ambassadors, the Clean Team, our Homeless Housing crew, Amy Buckler, Colin DeForest, Casey Schaffler, Carrie Retlin, Ken Bailey, my new friend, Public Works crew, they came through, and of course Parks, as always, they're there for everybody. So that it was a big day and a lot of work, and I know it was a hard day for a lot of people, but we hope it went smoothly. So just to sort of an overview of the City of Olympia's kind of multifaceted, multi-layered approach to addressing homelessness. Let's make sure this one works. You're probably all familiar with our continuum of housing interventions. You know, when in looking at this is really kind of the story of the power of partnering and leveraging relationships, including the Plum Street Tiny Home Village, partnering with Lehigh, partnering with our local shelters for expansions into expanding their capacity to 24/7 capacity, working regionally with the county and even at the state level. And I think what this reflects often also is that, you know, what success looks like is varied as the stories of the homeless people in our community. The other thing we want to talk about is some of the key steps in Olympia's response. I'm not going to go through the list, but I do want to I want to pull out a couple of things just to highlight. There were two extremely important community-supported ballot measures, the Home Fund and the Public Safety Levy, that are crucial to the work that we're doing and the ability to help people. There are some council initiatives that were super important. You know, there was a resolution on homelessness in the summer of 2018. There was the declaration of public safety emergency. There was the opening of the Plum Street Village and the mitigation sites, which have been powerful, and the beginning of a deeper long-term response planning that's underway right now. Also on this, community court seems like an outlier, but actually it's made a difference, and it's provided a needed path and connection for a lot of people who are experiencing homelessness. Again, the idea that what success looks like is different for different people, and for some it's just a community court connection that can change their lives. Public safety levy is responsible for the expansion of the walking patrol, for the creation and support of the Familiar Faces program, which those two peer navigators are responsible for some really good stories, some really positive outcomes for some of the most vulnerable people on our streets. And of course, the crisis response unit. So that's really been beneficial. And of course, one of the council initiatives was to bring in the downtown ambassadors and the clean team into city functions about, wow, was that just a little over a year ago? It seems like they've been here forever. But they're on the front lines, and they're doing yeoman's work. They're tough, they're compassionate, they're positive, they're funny, and they're effective, which is super important. The mitigation site, as you can see, we're 115 tent sites and 2 camp hosts in tiny houses, opened just in December of 2018, just a few months ago, and really got rolling in mid-January. And Plum Street Village, which is managed and operated by Lehigh, and it's been a great partnership for the city. It has been open only for about a month, and also is people are moving from the mitigation site to the Plum Street Village, and also providing a needed outcome, needed path for folks. A community development block grant. This is a program that's been around for the city for quite a long time. It's federal funding that has some flexible uses, between 400 and 500 annual entitlement. Some of the eligible activities related to homelessness are some capital costs around affordable housing, some capital costs for homeless shelters, for day centers, for social service. It's been able to support the support the Salvation Army moving to 24/7. It's been able to support our downtown ambassadors. So it's been an important funding source for us. And then the home fund. This was passed in 2008. We began collecting revenue last July. So we've got about 6 months income from this. Last year, the council approved using this fund to purchase the Martin Way property, which will hopefully we'll be able to produce a shelter for Interfaith Works to work out of, and a supportive housing apartment. So we're just getting started with this stuff. And finally, I'd like to always end my remarks by reminding people they can sign up for updates from the homeless response plan on our e-newsletter. So that's it for me.
Thank you so much, Kelly. All right, so I need a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Agenda is approved. And we are going to reschedule the special recognition that was scheduled for tonight for a future date, which takes us right to public comment. And I want to remind people that during this portion of the meeting, citizens may address the City Council regarding items related to city business, including items on tonight's agenda. And if you've signed up on one of these sheets, then I'm going to assume that you've read the policies regarding public comment. Basically, we accept public comment on matters, I'm sorry, we do not accept public comment on matters where we will be having a public hearing in the next 45 days or have had one in the last 45 days. We're having a public hearing tonight, so we are asking that if you are here to speak on the ordinance adjusting the multifamily tax exemption area boundaries, that you will wait until the public hearing period. I just noticed somebody on the public comment sheet was here to speak to that. So I will ask you to wait till our public hearing. You have 3 minutes. There's a countdown clock over my right shoulder as well. We just want to keep this space safe and respectful for all views, and that means that we discourage any kind of outbursts or clapping. If your team's up at bat, it's not okay to clap and support them in that way. You can just talk to them afterwards and thank them for their comments, but not during this evening. So with that, we have a little more people than I think we could fit into 30 minutes, but I'm going to ask you to stage yourselves and keep your comments within the time limit. I think we can get through everybody on this list in the first section. So with that, I'd like to call forward James Wellings, Brent Brandt, and Buddha Kawash.
Hi, thanks for having me here. Today's newspaper had an article in it that caught my interest. It's about the country of Japan has issued 345,000 entrance visas for foreign workers. I happen to be kind of unemployed right now. This is a current topic, by the way, but I'm kind of scared to do this, but I'm going to go to Japan if they'll let me. I'll stay away from Fukushima. The problems we had today, I saw everything that happened today. And, of course, I wasn't happy about it, but I also wasn't... I have friends downtown that run businesses. I have friends downtown that live on the streets. I'm kind of sitting on the fence. But I want to build a humanitarian culture center. I know, and I love what it said up here about voluntary, and it said all are welcome, no matter what your circumstances. Those things really work when somebody needs help and they don't feel excluded. And I've been through that. I went to group therapy. I suffer from a mental illness. It's called post-traumatic stress disorder. And I've recovered from it quite a bit because I was accepted and I got to choose my own path. And I didn't want anybody to feel sorry for me. Far from it. So I want to do this art project. And it's going to be business owners and street people and whoever wants to be involved in this art project. And it's fashioned after a current event that's making international news, which is none other than the border wall. We're going to build it out of shoeboxes. We're going to make it a humanitarian culture center. There'll be everything there. There'll be daycare. There'll be, you pick it out of a hat. There'll be all sorts of stuff there. There'll be mental health recovery centers. There'll be probably some, a Walmart or something like that, right? Some people aren't going to like that, but it'll be all-encompassing. And there'll be desalination plants. And there'll be wildlife refuge centers because they're at danger from this thing that we already have that's in the current news. Thanks for letting me share.
Thank you. Brent Brandt, followed by Buddha Kawash, followed by Mark Johnson.
Dear Mayor and Council members, I have sworn independent third-party witnesses that know that the Olympia Police Department are covering up crimes against me. They refuse to take reports when crimes are reported. They refuse to file reports and arrest people that have committed these crimes. I have asked for Bill Smith to be at court tomorrow, directly to the mayor and Lieutenant Allen. That is a request that is not unreasonable. yet I'm being denied. Why? I demand answers. I want the truth, and I want justice. There are 4 police officers that should be put off the payroll, and I am demanding the resignation of the chief because of the unlawful conduct of his men. I have them audio taped threatening me. That is all.
Thank you. Boudica Walsh, followed by Mark Johnson, followed by Ty Gundel.
Good evening. My name is Boudica Walsh. I am here because I would like the City of Olympia Council to clarify its stance that they are within their rights to remove homeless camps when alternative shelter is offered. What I am going to read from is the United States Courts of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit decision regarding Robert Martin, Lawrence Lee Smith, Robert Anderson, Janet F. Bell, Pamela S. Hawks, and Basil E. Humphrey v. City of Boise, otherwise known as the Boise decision, filed by the court September 4th. The first Boise City Code, the camping ordinance, makes it a misdemeanor to use any of the streets, sidewalks, parks, or public places as a camping place at any time. Boise Code 6015 bans occupying, lodging, or sleeping in any building, structure, or public place, whether public or private, without the permission of the owner or person entitled to possession or in control thereof. Very similar to laws that we have on our books. The panel held that the cruel and unusual punishments clause of the Eighth Amendment precluded the enforcement of a statute prohibiting sleeping outside against homeless individuals with no access to alternative shelter. As long as there is no option of sleeping indoors, the government cannot criminalize indigent homeless people for sleeping outdoors on public property on the false premise that they had a choice in the matter. There are 221 shelter beds in Thurston County. This goes up to 306 during the cold weather months, and during cold blue reaches 441. There are 115 tent sites at the mitigation site. Considering that the county houseless population census reads 835, 320 with are unsheltered, these numbers still fall short. Many of the shelter beds are actually only open at night, so there is no guarantee that they actually will be available to the people that are being moved by our police officers, because they are all first come, first serve. So, what I would like to know, can you substantiate that for every person moved today and during any other camp sweep since the Boise decision, that they who wanted a shelter bed to go to, that they were able to receive that for that night? Thank you.
Thank you. Mark Johnson, followed by Ty Gundel, followed by Franz Kilmer-Schultz.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Mark Johnson. I'm a retired licensed clinical social worker. For over 30 years, I served persons with disabilities who experienced homelessness. I am currently the chair of the Justice and Advocacy Committee of the First United Methodist Church of Olympia. We are building a tiny home in partnership with the Faith Alliance Initiative for Tiny Homes. We also support the unsheltered through Mutual Aid Mondays, providing food, clothing, blankets, and supplies. Doing so has been a blessing and a joy, as I have discovered a wonderful community. Without fail, everyone has been kind and generous. The food and clothing we bring goes in minutes because it fills a need. When I talk about this camp community, it is a place for mutual aid, support, and connection based on respect, dignity, and the worth of all people present. Sweeping the camps destroys the community that has been built. These citizens live a life of alienation, instability, and lack of agency in their daily lives, except in their community. Many will say, why don't they just move to the mitigation site of the shelter? For many, it is a bad choice. It is a downgrade in their safety and autonomy. I bet it may be at the shelter one night, but they have to leave the next morning and hope for a spot the next night. This stress and trauma and the loss of control triggers panic, fear, and the lack of safety. How would you be? As a member of the faith community, I understood that sweeps would not occur until the second mitigation site opened. Sweeping the camps while claiming options that work for the few puts more pressure on the churches and the community as a whole. This erodes collaboration and partnerships. I have recently learned that the city committed to using trauma-informed principles in creating options. It seems that this has been set aside because it is now legal to sweep the camps. What is legal at any given time is not necessarily immoral or even a wise use of public dollars. Remaining in small groups, defending our positions, and throwing verbal hand grenades at one another is not enough. I propose the creation of a city or county-wide stakeholders meeting for safe shelter. All stakeholders would be welcome. We would meet in a neutral location. We will sit around the table and share information, begin building trust. Trust will be built by open sharing of facts, research, and current information in a civil discourse. In his book, The Audacity of Hope, Barack Obama stated that democracy is really a conversation. Stop the sweeps and let's have a conversation to build sustainable solutions for all members of the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Ty Gundel, followed by Franz Kilmer Schultz, followed by Spencer Baldwin.
What I am asking for tonight is transparency, accountability, and simple acknowledgement of the very real fact that serious harm was done today and that dozens of our community members lost their homes. The council knows where Just Housing stands on this issue, and you know our concerns. Personally, for me, right now, one of my greatest concerns is the discrepancy between what city staff and city communications portray to the public and to the council about what has been happening during the sweeps that have taken place over the past month versus what we, the camp residents, and others on the ground are experiencing and seeing. For the sake of time, I'll just focus on one that's very recent to today. In the Olympian article and in the City E-News update and in the update we just heard, there was the announcement that there were 20 spots available at the mitigation site. When we went to the mitigation site the day that the eviction sites were posted, the site staff said that there were 4 for sure tents available with up to maybe 10. They were trying to figure out if the other 6 were still at the site. We went back this morning, 30 minutes before the eviction, and they still did not have a solid number. They asked us to come back in 30 minutes. They did not have a solid number until 9:40, 40 minutes after the eviction started. The final number was 11 tents. The number 20 comes from the fact that they allow up to 2 people in each tent. So the hope that 20 can go is the hope that 20 are willing to share a 10 by 10 space together. And a lot of people were, because they have each other's backs. I'm not asking that you take the word of Just Housing or other advocates over what you hear from other city employees or staff. What I'm asking is that you do the work and take the extra step to ask questions, to talk to people, to come down and talk to people at the camps, talk to us, we'll be outside all night, and to see for yourselves what's happening. Because it's a very different picture when you're on the ground, and you'll hear a very different story from every person that you talk to, and I can guarantee that. So I'm just asking you to do that, and I think that your constituents deserve that, because what a lot are feeling every time they hear these announcements at City Council, and what they hear when they read when they see the e-news updates, is gaslighting. And it's essentially telling a lot of people that what they are experiencing isn't real, and that causes trauma. So please take the extra step, ask questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Franz Kilmer Schultz, followed by Spencer Baldwin, followed by Phoenix Went.
Good evening, Cheryl and council members. I haven't been here in like 7 months, but I showed up at the camp at 7 this morning. It was 25 degrees, and there's ice on the ground all day until about 10 or 11 a.m. I I hauled off about 70 pallets this morning. Countless black plastic bags. It was a shame that I had to do this in 32. It didn't get above 40 degrees until 3 when I left to go to work. It was immoral and demoralizing to watch the campers. I helped a camper that literally had to leave her tent because we ran out of time. Because she was sleeping in it and had to pack up all of her clothes that she couldn't because it was so cold at night the last week. It hasn't gotten above 30 degrees as a low or until like 10 a.m. and all they can think of is staying warm. Watching those bulldozers tear apart people's shelters, it killed me. I was in tears all day. And I went to the Eagles Club, and my friend was like, don't take it on yourself. And no, it is on myself, because I am a City of Olympia resident, and it is my problem, because it's your problem. And it's 30 degrees outside. You guys should not be evicting people at 30 degrees. Wait until April when you actually have, or May, when you actually had the second mitigation site up. Because I went over with Ty to the mitigation site. They're like 10 or 11, maybe, we're not sure, still. And it was full within 30 minutes of the eviction starting. And people didn't know what they were doing. There's stuff on the sidewalks all day because people don't have a place to go. The Plum Street Village, I heard it called like a jail because the regulations that are in place. No one wants to go there because it's regulated. Regulations are not good in this sense. So thank you.
Thank you. Spencer Baldwin, followed by Phoenix Went, followed by Jerry Durker.
Good evening, members of the council. My name is Spencer Baldwin. I'm a local attorney. Today I saw the city I was born and raised in turn its back on the most vulnerable people, its tenants. At 8:58 a.m., city officials unlawfully entered the 204 Franklin Avenue premises. There was no sheriff to serve the residents a writ. There was no order to show cause. There was no hearing on such an order. There was no valid service of process or even an honest attempt to serve anyone in the camp. Thus, there was no personal or subject matter jurisdiction to pursue anything that happened today. Despite this, the city entered unlawfully onto the property. They invaded the privacy of their tenants. They destroyed their home, and they destroyed their community that they had built together. I heard the Strategic Communications Director claim this morning that there were alternative locations and that they would have adequate storage. Both of those were false. I was talking with a man named David last night who had been collecting bicycles. One of the things that he wanted to do was he wanted to start a bicycle business. He wanted to start a cooperative. And I wanted to help him. I was going to help him do that. And I told that to the police. I told them that they could not remove this because that was his property. And had they been sheriffs who had been trained in how to perform an unlawful detainer, they would have taken everybody's lawful possessions and not thrown them away indiscriminately. It was a complete injustice this morning. Without people trained to address the restoration of premises, the city violated the rights of these people en masse. And it's a continuing violation now because they are outside now. And there's a thing called the warranty of habitability. And that's something that applies to every landlord, regardless of whether or not you are a government or a private entity. You have to provide habitable premises for your people. That includes things like shared or common areas, reasonably clean, sanitary, or safe. Maintain structural components. Reasonable program for the control of infestation. Make repairs and arrangement necessary to put and keep the premises in good conditions. Adequate locks and furnish keys to the residents. Sorry. It's been a long day. I slept in my car, and the windows frosted from the inside. It wasn't 30 degrees, it was 23, with 68% humidity. The city demonstrated something that, in the course of representing landlords, I never quite got to. They became a slumlord, without accountability.
Thank you. I've got Phoenix Went, followed by Jerry Durker, followed by CC Coates.
My name is Phoenix Went. It is 21 degrees as of right now. 204 Franklin Street was actually a backup home that I had. I am about to lose my apartment. That was supposed to be my backup home. I've been residing there. You threw away my tent. I had legal right to having my tent. A federal court stated very clearly, appeals court, people who live in tents have the same privacy protections as those in houses, including of which habitability. You just threw away my stuff, and you just also went against so many state laws and statutes. You are literally have been denying me, and I have come before you guys several times asking to be able to bring before you a proposal for a tiny house village. And every time I have been denied my due process of being able to even ask for this. And now you just threw away my only emergency resource that I have to protecting my family. It also states on USB code 12705B, definition of regulatory barriers to affordable housing, meaning any public policies, including public policies embodied in statutes, ordinances, your municipal codes, are illegal because they were not identified by a jurisdiction in connection with its comprehensive housing affordability strategy, which means you did not provide us housing. You did not give us enough places to go. We are literally right now in strategic, what is called backup planning, to making sure that we have enough places for our displaced residents. You just put up on the screen the comprehensive plan for your housing plan. That it was to be for, it says continuum of housing interventions. And on the left-hand bottom, it says unsanctioned camps, which means you gave us permission to be there. And you just stole our houses. And you just threw away our houses. You bulldozed them. When you have it there, you gave us permission. You put a regulatory barrier against us, and you are illegal.
Ms. Went, thank you. Jerry Durker, followed by CC Coates, followed by Dylan Brooks.
Hi, my name's Jerry Durker. I live at 2826 Cooper Point Road, Northwest, Olympia, Washington, 98502. This is an aerial photo of an area called the Sunberg Sand and Gravel Mine site, where there's a proposal on this site to put houses on top of an industrial site that's full of hazardous waste. Thank you. As you notice in here, there are all these piles. These piles are just these piles are just the result of, from 2014 to 2015, of almost 10 million pounds of material, 400 trucks pulled out of industrial sites around the city by D.R. Horton and the developer and the owner of the site, Jerry Mahan. This site is in the middle of the Allison Spring Aquifer area. It's in hydraulic continuity with Allison Springs and the Grass Lake Wells. It has canyons in it. I'll just sort of point at them. Here, you can see where they start. You can see where they're on the other sides of the property and stuff. There's a number of places like that around here where the canyons would go across the whole site from north to south. Yet they don't go anymore. Oh.
So somebody hit the light in the back of the room, so when you turn it back on.
Sorry. Yes, we will credit the 15,
Mr. Durker,
the
we
15
can't.
seconds. Mr. Durker, we can't hear you. You're not talking into the microphone.
So there was canyons that went across this site
You can
that
start
are
the clock again.
already filled up with material, and much of this material was put in here from 1957 all the way up to 2015. I stopped the continuation of the site. If you notice on the side over there, there is 3 all the way back to 1996. This hasn't had a legal permit on it since 1978. Okay, for use of this site for any reason. The city has never permitted anything for this site, yet they've been benefiting from this with a number of street things and stuff because they were using the contractor that the same one that the port was using to move this material back and forth. They have moved this material into places like down to the to the 14th Street area down where Cooper Point, where they buried an entire wetlands down there and built houses on top of it, and they want to build 181 houses on top of it. They've just disclosed that they're draining stormwater into Bud Inlet and into Eld Inlet, partly through my house that's right there, and through my pond and my things that are there. So and they've said they've been doing this for years, and the city of Olympia knows it, and everybody else, and they're going ahead and the city of Olympia has already said they would allow them to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
C.C. Coates, followed by Dylan Brooks, followed by Robert Bruce.
Hello? Okay, good. Hello, City of Olympia and fellow citizens. I'm C.C. Coates. I've been living here for many years. Before I became disabled, I was quite accomplished. I was a union carpenter and a subsistence farmer down there on Johnson Point. Since becoming disabled, I have been treated really badly. First of all, the state did not give me enough resources to not be homeless. It took me 12 years to get on Social Security, and I continue to not have enough resources not to be homeless. I live in third world conditions. I have to use a chamber pot. I want to introduce a concept called proportional development. For every one of these luxury condos and apartments, all 2,000 of them, that are arguably for the upper 20% wage earners, we need to make an equal proportion number of housing for people like me. You also need to take into account the rest of the 60% wage earners. So you have the 20 to 40%, we need 2,000 units for them too. The 40 to 60%, we need 2,000 units for them as well. I'm trying to give you a longer term perspective on this. We got into this problem because of greed. We are building on the basis of greed, not the basis of need. When you give special tax breaks to the upper 20% builders, you are shortchanging your ability to provide for the lowest 20%. we really need to have more than 47 units of housing for disabled and senior people. There's another 80 permanent housing units going up the street. That's a far cry from 2,000. We need to make sure that we are developing in a fashion that gets people off the street. And in fact, we should probably start off with 2,000 affordable units to get people out of these miserable shelters, out of these prison camps. Charity is not the answer here. Charity is horribly wasteful. You spent $350,000 on the tiny houses, and a lot of people came out and put in some sweat equity. Good on you. But you're spending $750,000 a year on Lehigh and operation costs. That works out to be $1,700 per unit per month. You are not going to solve the homelessness problem by corralling people up into prison camps, ultra scrutinization zones. All it takes is one bad actor there and you go to prison. You don't know what it takes to be searched every day. It's
Thank
not
you.
okay.
Thank you. Dylan Brooks, followed by Robert Bruce, followed by John Pettit.
Hello. My name is Dylan Brooks, and I was down at the sweep today, all day. I echo a lot of the comments that have already been made. So some things is that this eviction notice was issued last Wednesday. This is not the first time that this has happened, that these notices are conveniently issued so that no council meetings fall in between the gap. I don't know exactly why there were no city council members that came down there today, even for a little bit, or the city manager. There honestly didn't really seem to be a plan. The city staff seemed to be playing both ends against the middle. There were, as has been said, there were a handful of spots at the mitigation site, not 20. There was no real place for people to go. Business owners seem to have not known that the city was telling people that they could sleep in alcoves as an option. This was one of the primary places that they told people to go to. The city said several times before that they wouldn't sweep the camp, as has been mentioned, until the second mitigation site was opened. This was just a lie. Clearly, it's been swept. There's no second mitigation site. Initially, as was promised, there were no bins for people to put their belongings in and be stored until someone asked about them. And then someone, Colin, I believe, left and hastily brought back bins. We should know that bins is euphemistic for trash cans. That's what was brought, was trash cans. The port, which is supplying, apparently, as someone mentioned earlier, where these trash cans are being stored in a storage container. So I don't think we need these other words for these things. There was no one that really seemed to be helping with that. I myself took 6 or 7 of these bins/trash cans down to Union Gospel to be stored in the storage container. Yeah, the fancy charts and the graphs from earlier belie the suffering that's going on outside of this very building. So yeah, stop the sweeps.
Thank you, Robert Bruce. Point of order, I'm going to ask that you do not have any spontaneous outbursts, or we'll take a recess. Robert Bruce, followed by John Pettit, followed by Chris Van Dalen.
Hi, I spent all day helping people move today, and I'm sorry if this is a little disorganized. Yeah, I'm just like really flabbergasted by the cruelty of what the city did. Ty kind of went over the facts that I guess are in dispute, and I hope that you'll take her advice and kind of look into that stuff yourself. I mean, you can't really ask people to trust the city or purport to want healing if staff and council, don't. I don't know. I mean, you should try to inform yourselves in that way. Yeah, I helped people move different places, and I had to help one group move twice because the police kicked them out of the place that they had moved to, so we had to load everything back on. They came up to us in a panic as we were helping someone else move because they kind of knew we would be over there, and we're like, okay, we got swept again. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just really disappointed, I guess. I hope that you guys just won't pat yourselves on the back so readily. I mean, there is good work being done, but people were really mistreated today. And right now, a lot of people mention that it's cold outside and it's dark. I mean, what you'll do after this meeting is very different from what the people who had to move today are going to do, which is rebuild their houses from the scraps of things that they were able to save. And a huge bulk of that stuff is just in dumpsters. So yeah, I guess just think about that, or acknowledge that fact. Yeah, I sorry. Yeah, I mean, I wonder why people aren't more angry. The people who are getting moved, actually the folks who got kicked out the second time, they were oh, the cops were actually pretty nice about it. It's not they're entitled and want to go do violence because they feel entitled to they just want to have a place, a little stability, and be left alone and be able to live. All right.
John Pettit, followed by Chris Van Dalen. Thank you. John Pettit, followed by Chris Van Dalen, and our final speaker is Mike Parshall.
Olympia City Councilman, to the manager, to all the city people, to all the homeless people, I'm going to tell you that actually, unlike the other comments that I've been hearing here, I can tell you that there's a lot of people that are very pleased to have seen a sweep and a cleanup. The sweep and cleanup is in direct proportion to a drug issue that has been lingering through the community. Some people think you don't have to regulate drugs. You have to regulate, you have to enforce the law. If people don't want to have the law enforced upon them, go someplace that they aren't going to enforce the law. We have to enforce the law. That is how we're going to help people get better. These people don't even realize the illness they have with their addictions. That's...
Right. Point of order. This is what I was saying at the very beginning, that this needs to be a space. There's no outbursts. It's up to me to claim if there's something that's hate speech. First Amendment rights go both ways, folks. So I'm going to make this as safe as respectful for the folks in this room to say their views as it is for you. Continue.
Thank you.
Point of order. Mrs. Walsh, would you please sit down? Or I'll have to ask someone to help you. Thank you for pausing the clock. That's the hard work for all of us, is what is the line of free speech? And it's very painful for us to hear some of these things as well. but we have to listen. It's your right to say them, and we have to be here as a body to listen to both sides. Mr. Pettit.
Sunday night, I received a phone call from somebody who does a lot of service down here at the and feeds the people and the homeless people. He says, "John, I know you're an advocate." He's somebody I know. He has a strong religious base. And he says, "I'm really worried they're going to take away those camps down there." And I explained to him, from what I understood, the one camp was going to be removed, but the actual camp that you guys are monitoring and taking care of was not going to be removed. And I said, so I don't have any problem with seeing a camp being removed if there's issues about drugs. He says, well, you know, I go into that camp and I've seen sites where they're all sitting around shooting up drugs and everything. I have a 16-year-old son, very proud of him. And what I know is this: if my son wants to go to a friend's house, and if his parents were allowing an open use of drugs or alcohol, illegal things within the house, I wouldn't want him there. I wouldn't want him in the city of Olympia, down in this region, when this has been allowed to go on. A few weeks ago, I encouraged you, enforce the law fully, and most of these problems will disappear all by themselves. So, unlike many times where I've come in and I've been very adamant and discouraged by the lack of action by the city council and the city, I applaud you. I know there's many, many people out there that applaud your action. We want Olympia to be a good, clean, safe place, a place that will provide help for people that are addicted to get help, for the mental ill to get help. But we can't just say, it's all okay, you just all live together and keep doing what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris Van Dalen, followed by Mark Parshall, or Pershall.
Mayor Selby, members of the council, I came today to thank you and to celebrate a success, but I'm really moved, and I have to just take a moment to acknowledge the hurt and suffering that I'm hearing from you all tonight. What went on? About 20 years ago, I started volunteering at a place called the Commons at Fertile Ground at 911 Adams Street, and this is a place that was purchased by Karen and Gail, who made it into a bed and breakfast and then later a community center. And about 10 years ago, my organization, the Northwest Eco Building Guild, took a lease on the property next door, the 911 Adams property, which we're signing a lease on tonight. And we proceeded to remodel the house and make it beautiful again, to transform the landscape around there into a demonstration of urban sustainability at a neighborhood scale. And I just wanted to come tonight because tonight the city is on the consent agenda signing the lease for our organization to work with the city on the to manage the site for the coming years, and we're looking to the future. We're partnering with the council members and with the staff to look at what could be done there. And I know the council is very interested in seeing some affordable housing, either on that site or on the block, and we share that completely. We're anxious to work together to create not only affordable housing, but sustainable, healthy, energy-efficient homes that have zero energy bills, to work with the Thurston Community Housing Land Trust to create ownership opportunities for low-income folks and others and seniors and others who are trying to, so we can have a diverse and mixed income community that is, that all equally share in the benefits of sustainability. And so we have a big vision for the site, and I think we share with the city, and we're looking forward to the collaboration. I was going to mention that next Thursday evening at Traditions, we'll be having a session with Joel Sisolak, who's from Capitol Hill Eco District. It's called an Eco District in the heart of Olympia. This is what we call the vision for the future of the Commons and for all of downtown. We were calling it. We were making an eco district before we even knew there was a word for it. And now
we're going to have a presentation next week. I'm going to bring this up to the dais afterward, and others would be invited to attend, especially if you live downtown or have an interest in the future of downtown. We're going to be talking about what that could look like and how we can really focus on sustainable, energy efficient, healthy, affordable housing for people in downtown. At 911, it's at 9th and Adams, right behind the library. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike Parshall is our last speaker of the evening.
Mayor Selby, City Manager Steve Hall, Mr. Hall, I just want to say one thing. End the sweeps, end the sweeps, end the sweeps. You've caused so much damage today. I don't even know who to yell at or who does this. Please, no more sweeps. You displaced like 100 people today. Someone could die from this. It's like freezing. End the sweeps, end the sweeps, end the sweeps. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. That concludes our public comment period for this evening. Any comments from the dais? All right. Oh, Councilmember Parsley. Rollins, I was looking. You moving and you talking. Yes.
I've been just thinking about what might be appropriate to say tonight and just trying to wrestle with like the weight of what has happened today. This is not a good day for Olympia. I was at a emergency management, emergency recovery training last week, and one of the, it's a really well-developed body of practices around recovering as a region from disasters, natural disasters like earthquakes and volcanoes and mudslides and that sort of thing. And one of the pieces I took away was, as part of situational awareness, is about developing a shared situational picture based on the ground truth, the truth on the ground. Obviously, social disasters are a lot more difficult to discern and understand the situational picture than, say, a geological event. But to me, it's about asking the question and having the courage to seek the answer of how we got here and why. I don't know, I did a lot of crying today, just like it's just so exhausting, like trying to like craft an argument about why we should engage, so that people are the solutions to our problem and not the problem. I think we all experience, and like neighboring businesses have been very able to advocate and communicate with what they experience as a secondary effect to having the camp at Smart Lot. And it's all real, but if, Einstein is quoted as saying, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes working to define the problem, understand the problem, and then 5 minutes to solve it. I believe we haven't come to that shared situational picture as an institution, about how we got here and why, and how it's tied to a culture of abuse and greed. And our solutions have to be in alignment with a vision for a different kind of culture. And by not being able to give a clear answer of really where people can go, it just seems like we're going back to 3 years ago, where we would just say, okay, here's the list, we have Salvation Army, but there's no actual beds. And to close, I guess, to me, there's a lot of, our institutional approach is denying the ground truth. It's denying the reality of how we got here and why, and how it's really ultimately a really cruel math problem, that there's going to be more and more people falling into this situation. And how many years is it going to take to build what we consider conventional housing for folks? Like we're going to be dealing with a ballooning number of people that have nothing. What is our like long-term recovery? And so what are we doing in the meantime while we're waiting for the state to figure out funding for affordable housing, and while we're waiting for partners to come through and waiting for the county 5-year pipeline? Why? I don't see what choice we have but to engage with the growing number of people that are out to find workable solutions based in relationship, because that's the basis of accountability is relationship. Acknowledging that peer-run communities are a good idea, a cost-effective idea. Again, making people the solution instead of the problem. I think we need to have that conversation as an institution, understanding how we got here and why, and that'll inform our approaches for recovering from this economic disaster. And I'm just really, really feel horrible that people who had built structures that were able to withstand the 18 inches of snow in most cases are gone, and we still can't answer the question people have been asking for years: where are we supposed to go? We got to start finding places to say yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on the dais tonight? All right. I wanted to also point out that Mark Toy, who signed up for the public comment, I moved him over to the public hearing. So if you're in the audience, we'll get to you in a moment. Right now, I need a motion to approve tonight's consent calendar.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions, comments, or polls? I just have a comment on item 4C. Anybody else? All right, so you do? Oh, so 4C is approval of a resolution authorizing an agricultural lease agreement with Spooner Berry Farm for a lease of property line adjacent to the Yelm Highway. So as many of you know, the city purchased, close to 100 acres? 80 acres out there, which many people think of as the Spooner's Berry Farm. It was actually owned by another local family, but what we wanted to do was make that space available to the Spooner family so that they could continue with their U-pick. It's pretty much all U-pick there, I believe. But anyhow, they're kind of a fixture out there, and so just so people know that they can look forward to buying their berries out there on Yelm Highway for at least a few more years. So anyhow, I just wanted to point that out, that was on our consent calendar tonight. So all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? We have consent calendar approved, which takes us to item 5A, which is a public hearing tonight. Tonight's a hearing on an ordinance adjusting the multifamily tax exemption area boundaries. And I'd like to invite our Deputy Director of Community Planning and Development, Leonard Bauer, up to explain to those of you viewing at home and in the audience what this ordinance means and how we got it in front of council today.
Thank you, Mayor Selby and the council. Tonight you have a recommendation from your Land Use and Environment Committee to look at additional area for the multifamily tax exemption program. The program's authorized in state law, RCW 8414. This is the purpose statement summarized from that legislation and has been in place for over 20 years. Areas can be designated by a city for multifamily housing in certain what's called residential target areas. And so tonight's issue before you is whether to add to the residential target areas that have already been designated in the city of Olympia. Target areas must be within a mixed-use urban center as determined by the city. They need to be determined to lack sufficient available, desirable, and convenient housing opportunities and be appropriate for the encouragement of construction of new multifamily housing or rehabilitation of underutilized buildings with residential housing. The process The Land Use Environment Committee considered this issue and the multifamily tax exemption both at its April and December meetings. Under the state law process, the council adopted a resolution to declare an intent to have a public hearing, which originally was scheduled February 12th. That, as you recall, we had a lot of snow and canceled the meeting that day, so it was rescheduled and re-advertised for tonight. The two notices in the paper were on February 20th and 26th, and interested parties who had expressed interest previously were also directly notified of the hearing tonight. Staff and the committee recommend adoption on first reading tonight after your hearing. After you hear from the public, you may choose to do that. And there is the possibility for the council to consider additional standards for target areas, and in addition to those that are already in place. The Land Use Environment Committee has scheduled consideration of some additional standards for its meeting later this month, and kind of separated that to come to you a little bit later. So that is their recommendation, or their process toward a recommendation. This is just a quick summary of the program. Residential construction or rehabilitation that adds at least 4 new residential units in these target areas is eligible to apply for either an 8-year exemption if the housing is considered market rate, or 12-year exemption for what's considered affordable housing. And under affordable housing, at least 20% of the units have to be affordable to low or moderate income people under the Housing and Urban Development definition, which is 30% of their family's income can be going towards housing. In each case, the city council reviews and approves a written agreement with the property owner, and then the city verifies the cost of that construction. There's an annual report that continues to verify that the standards are being met, the affordability requirements and other standards in the city's code. And really the result is that for that either 8-year or 12-year period, the county assessor does not add the residential construction value to the valuation of that property that's being taxed. So it's really an exemption from the value being increased, and not from property tax as a whole. The properties still pay tax on the land and any other development that's on the property that's non-residential. So our current, as I mentioned, the current multifamily tax exemption areas, there were 3 designated by the council first of all in early or mid-1990s, and then in 2000s. They're shown here in a little bit faded colors, but on the west side along Harrison Avenue, downtown area, and then on the east side going along 4th and State up to approximately 1st Street. Tonight's recommendation from the committee is to extend further to the east, and that area that's existing is the kind of the lighter purple, and the darker purple is the area recommended for extension out to Lily Road along 4th and State, and then Martin Way, just the properties that front those streets. And so that's why you see the little jagged line there is following the property lines for those properties that front on Martin Way and on 4th and State. So that's the recommendation before you, and haven't answer any questions now, or proceed to the public hearing.
Yeah, I will take or offer up question time with Leonard, but I'd also like to know if Councilmember Gilman, who's our chair of land use, has anything else that you wanted to add.
Leonard hit, I think, the key points. This program has been on the books with both an affordable housing and a market rate possibility for many years, and we've never seen an affordable housing project. So that's part of what inspired us to consider extending to the east side, is because there's a project that could potentially be an affordable project that would avail itself of this this program. And then as Leonard said, we have it on our agenda for March 21st to consider other modifications to the program. So tonight, what we're considering just the extension of that darker eggplant, whatever that color is there. That's what we're hoping to hear from the public about this evening, and then we'll come back from land use to council with recommendations for other treatments of the multifamily tax exemption.
thanks. Sorry to put you on the spot there, but I think it's always good to hear from the committee chair and the committee members if you have anything else that you need to add. Okay. And you get Councilmember Bateman.
Thank you, Mayor Selby. And thank you for that explanation, Chair Gilman, for the land use committee's perspective. I guess when I look at this, I also appreciate your note that we have not had a single affordable housing project come to fruition as a result of this tax exemption, and that's something that we've been briefed on and we're continually perplexed by. And as we heard tonight, housing is a serious issue, and we need to figure out a way to provide more incentives to get affordable housing. So I hope that that goes to land use. I think you're going to be delving into that more, but I also wonder about a cap on the multifamily tax exemption for instance, market rate that are $700,000 units, if we should be giving a tax exemption to high-end production. We definitely need housing. We need different types of housing, and I think we should be thinking critically about the tax exemption that we give to really like luxury multifamily unit structure. And then also, when I look at this, I'm assuming, and maybe I'm wrong, this seems like a bare minimum that we should be doing multifamily tax exemption along our urban corridor and looking out at like neighborhood villages eventually, neighborhood centers. Is that something that you're considering later on? Okay, great.
Thank you for that. Anybody else at this point? All right, thanks, Leonard. So at this time, I'd like to open the public hearing on the ordinance adjusting multifamily tax exemption area boundaries in the city here. And basically the rules are the same. I think there's only two, I know one signed up and one I think is here to speak as well. So you're probably familiar with the rules. So it's 3 minutes and yeah, so I'd like to open up the hearing. First person I've signed up is Mark Toy.
Hi, I'm Mark Toy. I'm currently the president of the Southwest Side Olympia Neighborhood Association. And the reason I'm here is that I got an email from Tim Kenny, who's with the Downtown Neighborhood Association, requesting solidarity on a proposal they made for, I think it's called the 4th and Columbia demand, that you do not give this tax exemption to people who are going to be using the properties for short-term rental housing. Specifically, he mentioned the property at 123 4th, where a good portion of those properties are being used as Airbnb rentals and still under that tax exemption. Further, I would suggest that you consider just doing away with the market rate exemption totally and only giving this exemption to developers that are going to provide some affordable housing in the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak tonight during the public hearing? All right, thank you.
I apologize for not having signed up, but it's very awkward. The sheets are taken in at 7. A lot of us don't get here till 7:30 because we know that it's going to be a while. So perhaps you could have another sheet out there that you'd pull in when the hearing starts. Just a thought. That's the way it used to be done. I'm Bob Jacobs. I live at 720 Governor Stevens in Olympia. The multifamily property tax exemption program contains 2 parts, a 12-year exemption for rent-controlled projects and an 8-year exemption for market rate projects. I will deal with those 2 parts separately. First, the 12-year exemption for rent-controlled housing. I understand that you want to provide an exemption to the rent-controlled residential project on the site of the former Bailey's Motor Inn on Martin Way. I have no problem with that, or with other uses of the 12-year exemption for rent-controlled projects. Because with these projects, we get something for our tax exemption, or tax expenditures, which is what they're called in public finance terms. Namely, we get badly needed housing for people who are unable to afford market rate housing. I have not actually costed out this program and compared it with other programs that foster the development of rent-controlled housing, but at least we're getting a tangible public benefit. The second part is the 8-year exemption for market rate housing. And this is the part that I really don't get. It amounts to paying bribes to builders to do what the builders do anyhow. So far, over $75 million of new construction have been applied for. Over $65 million of that have been approved, and the rest almost certainly will be approved. That means that taxing jurisdictions will receive $7.3 million less than they would without the exemptions, over half being school funding, and $2.5 million being City of Olympia taxes lost. Why would we ever do this? If there's a demand for multifamily market rate housing, builders will build it. And they'll build it in the areas zoned for it, because that's the only place they can build it. No subsidy needed. It's market rate. I have asked repeatedly why we would implement the market rate part of the law, why we would in essence pay millions of dollars for what would happen anyhow. There has not been a satisfactory answer to that question in 20 years. At a time when we rightly criticize the President and Congress for changing the federal tax code to favor wealthier people, our city is doing essentially the same thing, providing welfare for the well-off, subsidies to people who can afford market rate housing and can afford normal taxes. We will even be providing these subsidies to millionaires in at least one case. I urge you to terminate the 8-year property tax exemption program for market rate housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? All right. Just for the record, if you could introduce yourself.
I'm Bonnie Jacobs, and I live in Olympia. And I, too, am here to tell you that I really do like the affordable housing exemptions. They're fair and reasonable, and affordable housing is needed desperately. But I am opposed to market rate exemptions as unfair, and I'll give you 3 reasons. Olympia is a beautiful place to live. We need not resort to bribery or cave to extortion to get market rate housing built. Those exemptions are not needed. The schools are marvelous. The city is marvelous. Number 1. Number 2, the city needs the money. Last year, we had a special levy to hire policemen and train them to work downtown. The city did not have the money to hire cops. One of the primary duties of a city is to provide health and safety to its residents, and can you believe it, no money for the policemen. The police force should be fully funded. We should never need to have a levy to hire policemen. We need money that is being used to subsidize market rate housing. And also, there's an insidious unfairness to levies. For who really suffers when paying this tax? The working poor, working 2 jobs, not to buy a condo in Palm Springs, but to pay dentist bills, not to take kids to Hawaii, but perhaps out for pizza and a movie on their birthday. Those on fixed incomes, elderly, disabled, working poor. And when will the next levy come up? Talking about a county courthouse. What's that going to do to the working poor? Unfair market rate housing. The report itself tells us that $76 million in total construction value of the housing alone currently being built or approved, no property taxes, 9 years for them. Not only should this policy of extending tax exemptions not be passed on market rate housing, it should be rescinded to the property where it currently is determined. Enough is enough. We need the tax money, and let's have it go where it belongs. The room back there was mobbed tonight. We sat out there while we were just waiting and listening to the kids. The money can be better spent elsewhere. The money's needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak tonight regarding this public hearing? Is there anyone else? I'll close the hearing. Are there any additional questions or clarifying comments for the body or for Leonard? Councilmember
I just
Parsley.
wanted to point out that on March 21st, that's the night of land use. We will be covering that. And our good chairman allows public comment as well. And we will be covering such topics as were brought up.
Thank you. Anything else? All right. So, so no one has anything else to add to the record. All right. So we do have an option of approving the ordinance tonight. And I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Okay, I need a second. So you moved, you made the motion, so now I need a second.
Second.
All right. Awkward. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ordinance passes. And we look forward to hearing more from land use after their March 21st meeting on potential adjustments to this policy for market rate. Right. So that concludes the business part of our meeting, and it's time for council reports. And I have nothing to report as mayor this last week, so I will go to my right, Councilmember Partially.
Madam Mayor, I have only one thing to report. We had the monthly Joint Animal Service Committee meeting. We are in preparation of the interviews we will be doing later this week for our new executive director. We also started to lay out our strategic planning process. We're hoping by the end of the year to be able to have a potentially up to 5-year strategic plan for both our budget and capital expenditure. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Councilmember Partially? Councilmember Gilman.
Nothing to report this evening.
All right. Councilmember Jones.
Thank you, Mayor Selby. 2 items. First, I wanted to report on the February 27th meeting of the Economic Development Council. It was the Board of Directors. It's a group of about 25 members. It was their annual retreat to consider the strategic direction for the council. It was very data-driven focus for collaborative ways and opportunities to support job growth and economic development within the Thurston region. The other thing that I wanted to report on was the March 1st Thurston Regional Planning Council meeting. A part of that agenda included a discussion of the Sustainable Thurston Plan. That plan was adopted back in 2014, and it also is a regional plan. At that time, there were thousands of local citizens who participated in a visioning process to deal with land use, housing, energy, transportation, food, and health, and more. We're now at 5 years into that plan, and so this group, the Regional Council, is taking a deep look at how we're performing compared to that adopted vision. The current review considers 350 actions that were recommended by the plan. And this first report that's coming out, the performance report that we're looking at, is 127 pages. The initial findings are that the region is making clear progress across all parts of the plan, especially in the economic and environmental chapters. However, there are some complications related to lack of funding or shifting community support that have been an obstacle for some actions. The Thurston Regional Planning Council is moving forward with additional analysis in those areas of the plan that were specifically assigned to the council for their responsibility. And that's my report.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Councilmember Jones? All right, Mayor Pro Tem Bateman.
Thank you, Mayor Selby. I just have one item to report. On Sunday, Keith Stolley and I were able to attend a meeting on the west side at the Unity Church. As you all know, we set aside $100,000 of funds for local faith-based organizations that are interested in hosting tiny villages on their property, because we know that we cannot solve this challenge of homelessness on our own. And that money could go towards projects like electricity, or if they need additional sanitation or services, a variety of things that could be evaluated. But anyway, Unity Church is considering putting some tiny houses on their property. They're still going through that process. So we were there with folks from Lehigh to just talk about what the process is, factors to consider, and really just answer questions. As you all know, for those of you that attended the open houses or the discussions for Lehigh's Plum Street Village, there's a lot of questions that people just don't know and are unanswered. So there's a number of those meetings planned for other faith-based organizations. I think right now we have 3 that are interested. So I'm really hoping, and we're really excited if that's a possibility that will happen, because then hopefully our neighboring communities will also take that lead as well. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you. Any questions? Councilmember Gilman.
So when Mr. Johnson spoke today, he said that his church was building tiny houses. Do you know if any of those communities who've been considering it have finalized a decision or accessed our funds?
I think we might have an answer.
That might be a Keith question.
Keith question, or city manager might have some input as well.
Keith will know more than I do about this.
Yeah. We need to give you just permanent microphones over there.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. We are having continuing dialogue with a number of different faith-based organizations throughout the community, but no organization has said, yes, absolutely, this is what we're going to do. There are a number of organizations that are actively building tiny homes, so there will be a good supply of tiny homes when we get to that point. But at this point, no one's stepped forward and said, this is how we're going to do it, this is what we're going to do. We have a meeting on Saturday to talk with our friends from the Olympia Unitarian Universalist congregation over on the west side of town. They are considering potentially hosting some tiny houses, as is the Presbyterian Church over on the east side of town. So stay tuned.
All right. Yeah, Councilmember Jones.
So Keith, I don't know if you can confirm this or not, but it's my sense that these small faith-based or other tiny homes where there's just a handful and a close connection with a community are actually more successful than, say, a larger group of 20 or 25 of these units. Is that rumor, or is there data on that?
I don't have any data. I know that down in Eugene, they have individual units, they have churches that are hosting 2 or 3, and then they have larger communities, but I don't know of any data that says what's more successful than the other.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Good news about faith communities. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, moving forward. All right. Councilmember Rollins.
Thank you. Just one item to report. I got to spend last week out in Ocean Shores with a bunch of emergency management folks from different agencies in Thurston County, including Chief Gregg and Patrick Knopf from City of Olympia, OFD, as well as, 80 or so electeds and emergency managers and people from community development in all the cities. There's folks from LOT there, Intercity Transit, the PUD, just talking about how this region would recover from a natural disaster. And I had just a fascinating time. It was 3.5 days, super worthwhile. Some of my takeaways were the concept of going slow to go fast. So taking time to figure out, to plan what we're going to do in the event of that we need to recover from the big one. The simulation was, we were 30 days out from a 9.0 earthquake, and how do we, as policymakers and as subject matter experts, go to rebuild the community, not to what it was, but to a better version. And let's see, the concept of engaging the whole community, using all the resources, knowledge, and skills within the community was heralded as a best practice. One of the presenters said, if you want to know how to help the community recover, ask them. Really insightful. Another takeaway, I would love to know if Mike Reed from the city would have time to kind of get looped into some of this, because economic development and having a tax base to recover is really important. and then the great thing, so our policy group, what we were doing was testing out a framework for recovery that Paul Brewster at Thurston Regional Planning Council was contracted to write. So just kind of being the guinea pigs to see how it might work. So like after a natural disaster, there's like a policy group that's asking the questions about what is our vision for recovery for this region, and then different subgroups like around health, around schools, around the economy, to be able to provide data and information to the policy group. And then Jay Burney was the disaster recovery manager selected by peers, and did a great job at that. Was essentially like serving as a city manager, regional disaster manager in the event of a disaster. It was really fascinating, and the great part was we went from kind of talking just in the hypothetical to actually starting to talk about what this policy group might look like, and talking about designing a future in a local agreement, so that we'd already have kind of ground rules for how to go about recovering from a disaster. So that's all gonna, I think the next steps were the emergency council would be working on drafting some potential resolution language to take to the different jurisdictions, essentially saying we would resolve to move forward looking at an interlocal agreement for how we would work together as a region in the event of a big earthquake or any other disaster. So I think we're looking at maybe this spring, summer for that resolution language, but I will keep you posted. It's the trainers who are all FEMA contractors were really impressed with how far along this region's thinking is as far as emergency management, and I think a lot of that credit goes to the council that have been working together and modeling that cooperative culture for a long time. So I'm glad I was invited. Thanks.
Thanks for that report out. That was great. Any questions for Councilmember Rollins? Do you know how often they offer this training?
It seems like it's about once a decade that Thurston County gets the resources together to.
That's amazing that you got to participate. So
and this was the first one recovery oriented, as opposed to just a simulation of response kind of in the moment. So,
right.
Yeah.
Wonderful. All right, Councilmember Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor Selby. I have nothing to report, but I think it's a really good reminder. Anytime government gets together to think about the recovery is to remind our own selves to think about the preparedness at home or in our neighborhoods. And I had a chance to debrief a little bit with Debbie Sullivan last week when I was talking to her about the Finance Committee agenda and how important that community level emergency response planning at the neighborhood level is, because we won't get there. We won't be able to get everywhere regionally to help everyone right away. And so having all of the plans in place and the supplies to be able to weather the storm, if you will, is a good reminder for us all to make sure that we have that in place. That's all I have.
Mayor Pro Tem Bateman had a question about our neighborhoods tuned into this, and yes, they are. I think the CNA has been able to circulate, I forget the name of that training tool. It's based on your neighborhood responding, like you get together and you plan for who's on point for these different parts and who has the skill sets for these different things. And, it's a great way to, bond with your neighbors as well, is learning about, how to check on, your vulnerable neighbors and that kind of thing. So there's a name for that program.
It's CERT, Community Emergency Response,
Okay.
but there's multiple versions.
Yeah. Okay. So it has been done, but it's never, neighborhoods change and people move in and move out. And so it's really important to stay on top of that. So
I also should just say that besides Chief Greg and Patrick and Jay, there were 8 or 9 other Olympia staff that came. So I really appreciate it. It was awesome to see the commitment and the time that departments are willing to share their folks, because it was 4 days. So Debbie back there and a bunch of folks I'm on the spot and can't remember, but it was a good crowd, fun people.
Thank you. All right, our city manager report.
One brief report I just sent your way. The rates for city-owned parking lots for 2019. So the city owns 8 parking lots in our downtown area. Our city code says that the rates for neighborhood residential parking are set by the city council, but actually the rates for our lots are set by the city manager. But when I make changes, I am required to file a copy of those changes with the city council. So I'm filing my copy with the city council so you know what those rates are. There are only 2 changes for 2019. We'll be charging $30 a month for our gravel lot and our Ole and Franklin lot, for our Ole and Franklin lot and our smart lot. The smart lot is also the one where we're going to experiment this year. We've gotten a lot of demand for pay by phone for short-term parking. So we're going to mark 10 of those stalls in that lot at the smart lot for short-term pay by phone parking only. It'll be 50 cents an hour. We'll see how that goes, but there seems to be a lot of demand for that short-term parking. So those are the rates for 2019. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
All right. Any questions for Steve? All right. Seeing no questions and no further business before the Olympia City Council, we're adjourned.